Hey everybody, Quantum here, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at the Emerald Steel discard deck that is so popular in Ursula's Returns meta as we are now in the middle of Store Set Championships. This is a deck that is going to be popping up everywhere if you haven't seen it already. But we're going to take a look at 4 matches in this video. The first one is a mirror match, the second one is going to be against Ruby Amethyst, the third against Amethyst Emerald, and then the fourth against Ruby Sapphire. So 4 very meta relevant matches for this deck. So if you want some tips and like learning some of the interactions between Emerald Steel and the other top decks in the meta, including this mirror match, this is a good video to watch. In this iteration of my opponent's Emerald Steel, they are on the Pegasus package. Here you can see us dropping the Diablo. Just taking a look at their hand, they do have the Shift Pegasus, sorry. They're also running Flynn Rider, so a little bit heavier on the discard package, more aggro focused build because the Shift Pegasus could give the Flynn Rider evasive, meaning that it can continue to quest for 2 safely without being challenged, which means a very aggressive Lorcana on the opponent's side here. So turn 2, they do indeed drop the Flynn Rider. They're going to quest with the 1-drop Pegasus, which has evasive, so it's protected, and pass turn. Now we do have the Diablo Shift if we want to get rid of our Let the Storm Rage on, and I think that's what we're going to do since we do have kind of what's air quotes considered the god line in the turn 2 Shift Diablo after dropping Bucky. But yeah, losing that Storm Rage on doesn't feel too good. However, the opponent is also on 4 cards, so the forcing of the discard there is pretty nice, and then Diablo is going to be able to take out the Pegasus to prevent the shift line because the 3-drop Pegasus is, or sorry, the 5-drop Pegasus, that's a 3/3, is a pretty good counter against opposing Diablo. So while you might think like, what is the real point of playing this, the Pegasus package and Emerald Steel, this is one of the reasons why. Because in the mirror match, it represents good value to trade into the other evasive threat, which is Diablo. But of course, you have your Steel Songs for that usually, right? So there you can see them inking the Pegasus once they realize that we've outed it, and they drop an Ursula Deceiver of All, which we knew they had from the first 1-drop Diablo. But what's nice is we have our Diablo engine rolling, and we have a couple of Floodborns that we're going to be able to play as well. So we just develop a 1-drop Robin Hood here since we don't really have a better play, and then pass turn, hoping the opponent is not going to be able to take out too much of our threats, but that Strength of the Raging Fire is going to put in a lot of work against us with the Ursula Deceiver of All being able to sing it twice and take out both of our non-warded threats in the Diablo and the Robin Hood, so that prevents us from shifting there. And we draw the Ursula Deceiver just a little too late, unfortunately, but the opponent is only on 1 card in hand, so while this doesn't look like a great situation for us, we're actually not in too bad of a situation. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at what the opponent has. They have a Pegasus, and this is actually a little bit of a rough spot because they can put a lot of questing power on board. I don't have a way to deal with that Flynn Rider just yet, and that Pegasus coming down questing for 2 with evasive is also a bit of a problem. Now they're probably going to ink and play the Pegasus here is what my guess is, which means that they're not going to have anything left in their hand for me to discard off the Bucky, so the Bucky kind of did what it needed to do early on. Even though I think I only really got 1 discard off of it, they actually ink the Pegasus here and keep the last card in hand, which I would argue that's a huge misplay on the opponent's side. They probably think like I'm not on any Floodborn since I've only triggered the Bucky once, but it should be pretty apparent that if I wasn't playing Floodborns earlier, like this is where reads matter, that I was likely on the 5 cost or the higher ink cost cards. So instead of playing out the hidden Inkcaster, they opt to just keep it in their hand and let it get discarded, because when they play the Inkcaster they can draw a card, which, you know, you could argue they should have played the Inkcaster, if anything, drawn a card, and if they would have drawn a 3-cost or lower card, they could have played it out and not have a card in hand for the Bucky anyway. So that was a pretty big misplay on my opponent's side, in my opinion. Now they draw a Tinkerbell and they don't have the ink to cast it, so they have to ink it, and now the board state looks very positive for me. We have a Robin Hood on board here. We could opt to challenge into this Flynn Rider and lose our Bruno here, which might be the play because the Bruno doesn't really do anything much for us, and we'd much rather play the Beast in this scenario. Or we could sing the Bruno to get rid of the Ursula Deceiver of All, which was the ready threat. Okay, that makes sense. And then just quest with the Ursula Deceiver and pass turn. So this board state is pretty favorable for us because the opponent shouldn't be on anything that could massively board wipe us. Even a top deck Grab Your Swords, while it would shut off the Beast, doesn't do enough to deal with the Robin Hood. It's just such a tank in this matchup. So whoever establishes the draw engines first and then puts the Robin Hood on board, I would argue has the advantage. Obviously Emerald Steel decks have kind of evolved now, I think, to pretty much all include Along Came Zeus because it's so valuable in other matchups as well. The draw 2 here represents tremendous value, getting the grab your swords, which we're just going to hard cast and then quest with everything. And just like that, my opponent's on nothing. I do have Let the Storm Rage on in the back pocket as well to just draw an additional card, even though I'm going to draw 2 off Beast here, most likely. Yeah, they top deck an Ursula Deceiver, which rips the Storm, unfortunately. But it's too far gone for the opponent here. There's not much that they can do. We just draw into another Storm, which is crazy good here. We're just going to raw drop the Diablo, nothing for the opponent to discard, and yeah, the match is a foregone conclusion at this point. We don't quest with Beast because we want to keep the draw engine rolling. We can afford to play a little bit more of a passive game now since we're in such a dominant position. So just maintain the board advantage and the card advantage in this state, and we should have no problem closing things out. They might opt to trade their Ursula Deceiver into my Ursula Deceiver to just slow me down a little bit, and that's exactly what I want them to do, because then my Robin Hood can take out this Ursula Deceiver, still get the 2 lore, and clean up their board even further. We draw 2 and we get the Flynn Rider, so we're going to sing Let the Storm Rage on with Diablo to take out their Flynn. Then we're going to use the Robin Hood to take out the Ursula, just like I mentioned, and then drop the Flynn Rider, most likely to just accelerate the closeout of the game. We're now comfortable to quest with Beast, and at this point, yeah, there's absolutely nothing the opponent can do. And just like that, winning the mirror match, going second, just simply because we were able to mulligan correctly, get our draw engine rolling. We did have the, busted nuts play, air quotes, but even without it, just having the Diablo first in this matchup represents tremendous value if the opponent doesn't have the way to out it. And yeah, we're just going to go ahead and quest for game. Let's move on to the next match. Alright, in this next matchup, we're going up against Ruby Amethyst, and we are going first, in which we are heavily favored. Now, looking back at these matches, I would say that I would play them much differently. So in this particular matchup, you do want to aggressively mulligan for a Bucky. You don't really play that many on Inkables, so you know, keeping the Aladdin, for example, as ink, since we know the Ruby Amethyst deck isn't really on items, so we don't really want to play the Aladdin. We'd rather play Diablo as our turn 3 Flyborn if we're not shifting it. But trying to aggressively mulligan for the 1-drop Diablo and the Bucky is definitely the way to go. In this scenario, I think my thought process was, well, I have the shift Robin Hood line on 3 if I wanted to, or Diablo, and I do have Ursula Deceiver on 2, which is better than trying to aggressively mulligan for a Bucky, because it is a risk if you mulligan too many of your cards away and you don't find what you want. You could end up with a bunch of 5-cost cards like the Brunos, the Robin Hoods, the Beast Tragic Heroes that you're not able to play anyways. So while this isn't necessarily the worst, and we do end up drawing into a Bucky, it's not necessarily the best either. You can let me know in the comment section below into this matchup. Do you take the risk to try to aggressively mulligan always, or do you just accept the fact that, hey, this hand is still playable? I do have a favorable matchup into RA, so maybe I just keep this and play it out. Here the opponent is on Minnie Mouse, most likely being on Teeth and Ambitions as well to deal with Diablos, and they drop a Pascal on turn 2. So instead of dropping a Diablo, I opt to shift the Robin Hood, which will still trigger the Bucky. I ink the Ursula Deceiver after I see the opponent ink the friends on the other side, thinking that they probably aren't on any songs that they're going to play relatively soon, because a Be Prepared is still pretty far away. By the time they can cast the Be King Undisputed, I'll probably have a few other characters on board anyways, and I just wanted to mitigate the potential of them dropping a Teeth and Ambitions on that Minnie Mouse and taking out a Diablo if I played it on turn 3 instead. So that was the thought process behind shifting the Robin Hood and not playing the Diablo right away. We draw into a second Let the Storm Rage on, which represents good value here in being able to take out the Sisu. We're going to be able to hard cast the second one to take out the Sisu there. We ink the Diablo and then pass turn. So this looks okay. I mean, ideally, inking the Bucky there and then playing the 1-drop Diablo would have been nice, but I would only really do that if I knew I had a song to discard off the shift. The opponent just has another Sisu though, which, is totally fine in this particular scenario because the opponent is only on 2 cards. So what we're going to be able to do here is on 5 ink, drop Bucky and then drop Diablo to completely choke out the opponent and discard their final 2 cards in hand. And this represents like really good value here because there you can see the King Undisputed and the Flynn Rider Frenemy being discarded. And now we can just quest with the Robin Hood. The Sisu is only on 2 strength since we only have 1 card in hand. And the opponent top decks a castle, which is really good, but they don't have any ink to move anything to the castle here, which is really good for us because right now we don't even have enough strength on board to take out the castle unless we wanted to exert our Buckies, which we normally wouldn't do. But in this scenario, you can argue that the Buckies have served their purpose. We can afford to maybe lose 1, but yeah, the opponent is just in a really rough spot regardless, so there should be no contest here at this point. I'm just thinking what the best line of play is here. Like, the castle gaining lore isn't really a threat, so I think we can opt to... I think we would want to... Okay, we're going to opt to throw damage. Yeah, okay, so I do end up taking out the castle. Interesting. Knowing full well that the opponent can't likely out both my Buckies, because they would have to draw a Fox off the top, and we draw a third Bucky anyway, so it doesn't even matter. But they'd have to use, like, the only way they out both these exerted Buckies is if they use the Sisu to out one, drop a Fox, bounce back the Sisu, and then use Fox to take out the other one. So it was relatively safe. They drop a Rabbit, which just means more card draw for us on the Diablo here, and they're inking a Lumiere. So a very interesting build, or some tech cards in this Ruby Amethyst list. But at this point, yeah, there's not really much that your opponent can do. This Strength of a Raging Fire will allow us to take out the Readied Rabbit. It'll give the opponent a draw, and then we can use our Diablo in hand to trigger what's likely to be 2 of our Buckies, or the opponent doesn't even go for one of them, so we have 3 Buckies on board still. But whatever they draw off Rabbit will be discarded off of the Floodborn Diablo that we're going to play after we Strength away the Rabbit. And then Robin Hood can take out the... well, Robin Hood and a Bucky could take out the Sisu if we really wanted. We'd have to throw a Bucky into the Sisu. Oh no, okay, yeah, just play Cove. What am I saying? Play Cove. Wow, yeah, this deck is just so broken sometimes. And this is really what the deck has to do, right? Like, yes, you probably lose if your opponent gets to the top end. Oh, I'm stupid and I didn't move the Robin Hood to the Cove to give it the extra strength boost. I still use the the Bucky. I guess this is fine too, valuing putting my Diablos on the Cove just in case the opponent draws Brawls, I guess. Because I guess that's fine, correct? Because I don't necessarily need 3 Buckies on board. So losing one of the Buckies is fine. Playing, like, valuing keeping my Diablos up, playing around a top decked Brawl is I guess okay. But normally you'd move the Robin Hood to the location, and then you would get the value off of not having to trade out one of your Buckies. The top deck Maui here is pretty good for the opponent, but we're going to draw off the Robin Hood, and we draw, oh my goodness, like, look at this, man. Like, this is just ridiculous. We draw a Grab Your Swords. So we're going to use 1 Diablo to take out the Minnie Mouse, because we have 3 strength on our Diablo, so it takes out the Minnie Mouse with only the 3 defense. We can afford to just continually ink here too if we really wanted to. We play out the Jafars, and I don't even bother using the Grab Your Swords. I just say Maui can go ahead and take out the Beast Tragic Hero, because the opponent's only on 5 ink, and they're not going to be able to play a Be Prepared even if they get it. We're not fearful of well, they can't play a Lady Tremaine or a Madame Medusa if they top deck it either. We're not fearful of a Be King Undisputed, so there's really nothing the opponent's going to draw. Like, even a Brawl here doesn't do anything for them. Like, they can take out the Ursula Deceiver of All, so yeah, they just end up scooping it up there. Alright, in this next matchup, we're going second against Emerald Amethyst, and this version is a discard-oriented version a little bit, which is interesting to see, because the aggro aspects of Amethyst Emerald have kind of fallen out of the format a little bit, despite somebody getting second place in Chicago with this deck. But we mulligan aggressively for the Diablo line, since I think we already had a couple of pieces in hand. You can see the opponent inks a Hypnotize, drops a Curse Merfolk, and passes turn. And our line of play should be fairly standard. The Aladdin doesn't really represent too much value here, other than being a Floodborn, since this deck doesn't really play, the opponent's deck that is, doesn't really play too many or any really items. They do play the Queen's Castle, but that's a location. So we just drop a Diablo and pass turn. They do have a Sudden Chill. They ink a Cricky. I think that's how people said you were supposed to say it, not Crikey. And they play a Sudden Chill, most likely just thinking to themselves, well, if he has Ursula Deceiver and he drops it, I'll just play the Sudden Chill now since I don't have a 2-drop character. Like, the Flynn Rider is probably what they want to end on turn 2, but they don't have that. So we're going to go ahead and ink second 1-drop Diablo, play the Bucky, and then get the shift off by discarding the Sudden Chill. And this is the only interaction where Curse Merfolk just feels terrible, is that if you're able to sing Let the Storm Rage On, because you draw a card and you out the Curse Merfolk for free. So that's really good value for us. The opponent draws around 4 cards, we're on 3, but we do have the Diablo engine set up, and there's no real way for Emerald Amethyst to deal with this, other than doing something like playing that Jock and giving our Diablo Reckless, which would be really good, but you need a character on board that can really trade into it. So this is not a great spot for the opponent. They could Mother Knows Best, but then that just gives me the Floodborn to replay next turn and trigger the Bucky. They have their own Diablo, which could contest my Diablo, but we top deck I'll let the Storm Rage on, and this is why the Steel variant of Emerald is just so much stronger than the Amethyst variant. We drop an Ursula Deceiver to check out the opponent's hand. They have Hypnotize and a Curse Merfolk, so nothing that's threatening to us. They're going to ink the top deck Bruno, even if they play the Hypnot. Well, they probably play out their whole hand here, right? We're going to instantly discard the Tinkerbell because we've already set up for the Robin Hood shift. The draw off of the Hypnotize gives us a draw as well, so that Hypnotize did absolutely nothing for them because we still end up on 2 cards. That's the strength of the Diablo there. We're going to opt to play the second Diablo instead of shifting Robin Hood, since, you know, the quest for 2 doesn't really matter for us. We'd rather wait till they exert their Curse Merfolk so we can challenge right away. And then we're just going to quest with everything probably. We can, yeah, it's a mistake not questing with the Bucky there because there's nothing the opponent can drop that would take out my Bucky. I guess I'm playing around a Fox, but they just scoop up right away because they realize they're just so far behind. Now in this final matchup, we're going up against Ruby Sapphire, and we are going first. Now this matchup is a little tricky. My testing partner does favor this matchup. He says he feels very comfortable into green steel, and over this past Saturday, July 13th, he actually almost won our whole store set championship, came second with Sapphire Ruby, and he beat out, I think, 4 Emerald Steel decks. He didn't lose to a single one. He lost the finals against Ruby Amethyst, which was funny because he beat that player in Swiss rounds 2-0, but then he kind of bricked in one of his matches, or both, two out of his 3 matches in the finals, unfortunately. And that's the risk you run when you play against Sapphire Ruby. But anyways, to start off, we do once again have no Bucky, you know, so not the nuts draw, but we do have the Diablo into the Shift Diablo, which is really good. The Ursula coming down here represents tremendous value since we were able to see the opponent's hand. We're going to be able to on turn 2 get that targeted discard with the Ursula Deceiver in order to rip the 1-jump to slow the opponent's game plan down. And in this matchup, that's really what you have to do because they play so many, you know, top end heavy cards that if you can slow down the ability for them to get to the top end, you can definitely race them with this deck. So you can see they just ink and pass. They have no turn 2 play since we ripped the 1-jump ahead out of their hand, and the Aladdin in this matchup actually represents good value. So despite us not having a Bucky yet, the Aladdin is going to be able to take out their items, which means that they'd have to play Hiram and the item in the same turn. Otherwise, the Aladdin will rip the items to shreds. It also prevents them from putting that Fishbone Quill down so that you see them ink it there instead of playing it out to get the additional ramp. So we've stopped them from 1-jump and we've stopped them from Fishbone Quill. Now they did have the Brawl for the Diablo, which isn't great, and I don't really have a good follow-up play since I've got both of my only 2 copies of Grab Your Swords, which isn't great in this matchup to play. So we just play out the Cove. We put both of our characters on it. Would have been nice to play that last turn in order to dodge the Brawl on the Diablo. Now not having an item here, the opponent inks the Hiram, and I don't really understand why they did that because now my Aladdin pops the fish hook that they just played. So I think that was just like a you know, a massive oversight from the opponent not realizing there, because it would have made more sense to just drop the Hiram and not trigger the draw and then play the geez, what do you call it? The fish hook on the following turn where they can then quest with the Maui and banish the fish hook to draw 2. Right, because you have to play the item and banish it in the same turn in order to get value off of the fish hook. So massive misplay from the opponent. They ink yet another Hiram, which in my opinion is a huge mistake because you definitely need to keep your Hirams in this matchup. But I guess they think me not being on Bucky makes it a lot easier for them in this particular moment. And the Maui just checks my board really because it means that I can't quest with anything unless I'm gonna, because you know I will lose whatever I quest with to the Maui, and the Maui will go like 2 or 3 for 1 here. So the opponent is still on cards. They're on 7 ink now, which means they could drop a Be Prepared. I don't know what they have in hand anymore. It's been a long time since I played that Diablo and Ursula Deceiver to check out their hand. They were playing up to this, I guess, the Sisu 8-drop, which again represents great value for them usually because they can out a Bucky and Diablo with this. But they have nothing to do with the Maui. They have 2 cards left in hand, and at this point I think I can maybe double Sing. Okay, no, I hard cast a... No, I'm not going to double Sing. What am I saying? I was thinking like Sing and then hard cast Grab Your Swords, but that's bad because that doesn't kill the Maui. I would have to Sing Let the Storm Rage on with the Aladdin, Sing Grab Your Swords with the Beast, and then hard cast Grab Your Swords. in order to take out the opponent's board here. So I don't end up doing that. I just put 2 damage on the Maui to draw a card, I guess. They quest with the Sisu, and okay, we still don't have a Bucky, but they have double Sisu on board now. They were able to wipe out our Diablo with the yeah, with the second Sisu here, and now I opt to double grab your sword. So I guess I was setting up for the next turn here, which again, you can argue is a little risky. Like, setting up for turns in this game, at least in the games, the way that the meta is right now, is a little risky. I've done this a few times, at least earlier on in the format when Pixelborn was still around. So I don't really recommend that you guys do that now. You probably just want to play for that turn. Sometimes it's okay in a simplified game state to try to set things up. So what I mean by that is I was playing the Let the Storm Rage on the Beast, in order, or sorry, on the Maui, in order to set up for the double grab your swords play next turn, which ended up working out, but normally you wouldn't want to do that. We end up Brunoing back the Tamatoa, which, you know, just slows the opponent down a little bit, but in this scenario, it might be enough. So now we kind of get insight into why the opponent inked all those Hurons earlier on, is because apparently they were sitting on a ton of Hurons, so they played their third one here after inking the first 2. They were on the 3-drop Sisu, which, you know, can be good, especially with Ice Block in this matchup, because it can take out the Diablo a lot easier. But they don't end up replaying the Tamatoa, which is fine in this scenario. We're going to be able to draw a ton of cards here off Beast, and still no Bucky. We do have a Sudden Chill, but we don't have the Ursula Deceiver on board sorry, so that we can't really get the double value off of it. We're just going to go ahead and quest with everything, because at this point, the opponent needs a Be Prepared in order to wipe out our board, and what they have on board right now isn't enough to stop me from questing for game next turn, right? Because they'd have, like, the Huron and the Sisu only hit for 1 each, so they have nothing to take out my board, and we know they have a Tamatoa in hand still. Unless they have another Maui or a Be Prepared, I win the game next turn. So they drop Fish Hook here, so they are on multiple Fish Hooks, which is interesting, and they could use the Fish Hook to beef up one of their characters to take out my Aladdin and stop me from going for game next turn. Actually, no, they can't, because they have to deal with the Robin Hood as well. So they have to deal with Beast and Robin Hood, and I guess they can't. So yeah, here they just, I guess, play out their hand knowing full well that they can't really do anything. They were on all 4 Hurons. They end up inking the Tamatoa in the end, I believe, because I think it was in their hand and we didn't end up discarding it. But there's nothing they can do, and they just end up scooping it up. So that's going to do it for this video, guys. Hopefully those 4 matches allowed you to see some insight into Emerald Steel. Obviously, this deck will be going away at the end of the format with the Bucky Errata, but this card will still be around, right, in the forms of both Emerald Steel without the Bucky Floodborn package. It'll go back to what it was played like in set 3, but also in the form of Amber Emerald as well, which doesn't really focus on the Bucky either. So yeah, on screen is a deck list. If you like this video, a like would be appreciated. Thank you again for watching, though. Quantum is out.